The Senate will come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Bridges. Buckner. Coleman. Cook. Coram. Danielson. Donovan. Finberg. Fields. Gardner. Janal. Gonzalez. Hanson. Heisey. Holbert. Hawkes Lewis. Kirkmeyer. Colker. Lee. Liston.
Excused.
Lundeen. Moreno. Moreno.
Excused.
Pedersen. Priola. Rankin. Rodriguez. Scott.
Here.
Simpson. Smallwood. Sonnenberg. Story. Winter. Woodward. Zenzinger. Zenzinger.
Excused.
Mr. President,
Here. With 32 present, 0 absent, and 0 excused, we have a quorum. Excuse me, with 32 present, 0 absent, 3 excused, we have a quorum. Would the good senator from Longmont please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you, Mr. President. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the journal. Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the reading of the journal for Monday, April 12, 2021 be dispensed with and that the journal be approved as corrected by the Secretary.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes having the motion is adopted. Senate Services.
April 13th, correctly printed House Bills 239, 240, 241, 242, correctly re-engrossed Senate Bills 188, 195, 198, correctly revised House Bills 1022, 1047, correctly re-revised House Bills 1106, 1119, 1113, correctly enrolled Senate Bills 107 and 117.
Will the clerk please add Sarah Zenzinger to the roll call? Committee reports.
April 12th, Committee on Health and Human Services, after consideration of the merits of committee recommends the following House Bill 1146 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation with recommendation placed on the consent calendar. April 12th, Committee on Business, Labor, and Technology, after consideration of the merits of committee recommends the following House Bills 1048 be amended as follows, so amended be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation.
Third reading of bills, final passage. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1047?
House Bill 1047 by Representatives Kennedy and Senators Lee concerning the drawing of voting districts by county governments.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1047 on third reading and final passing and ask for an aye vote.
Is there any discussion? Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, members, in many ways, there are not things that are objectionable in this bill, in that, for the most part, it codifies what is well-known, well-established law concerning the drawing of districts for representation, which the counties affected already do. Everyone is for local control until they're not. I urge a no vote.
Will the clerk please add Senator Moreno to the roll call? Seeing no further discussion, the motion before the body is the passage of House Bill 1047 on third reading and final passage. Are there any no votes? Senators Lundin, Gardner, Scott, Simpson, Heisey, Kirkmeyer, Woodward, Smallwood, Rankin, Coram, Sonnenberg, Priola, Minority Leader, Cook. With 20 aye votes, 14 no votes, 0 absent, and 1 excused, House Bill 1047 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Winter, Moreno, Hawkes Lewis, will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1022?
House Bill 1022 by Representatives Froelich and Senators Janal concerning the protection of parties through the enforcement of proper surrogacy agreements.
Senator Janal.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1022 on third reading and final passage and ask for your support.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the passage of House Bill 1022 on third reading and final passage. Are there any no votes? Mr. Minority Leader, Senators Lundin, Woodward, Kirkmeyer, Smallwood, Sonnenberg, Scott, Cook, Rankin, with a vote of 25 ayes and 9 no votes, 0 absent, 1 excuse, House Bill 1022 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Fields, Buckner, Winter, Hawkes Lewis, General Order, second reading of bills. Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Committee of the Whole resolve its, I'm sorry, first time, sir. Sorry, Mr. President. I move that the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of General Order's second reading of bills.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes having the motion is adopted. The Senate will resolve itself to the Committee of the Whole for consideration. General Order, second reading of bills. And Senator and Senator Danielson will take the chair.
The committee will come to order. The court rule is relaxed for everybody. Will the clerk please read? Pardon me? Oh, sorry, masks. Will the clerk please read the title to House Bill 1018?
House Bill 1018 by Representative Bennett and Van Bever and Senators Hawkes Lewis concerning allowing adoptive parents who are parties to adoption assistance agreements to pay for medical services that would otherwise be reimbursable under the medical assistance program.
Senator Hawkes Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1018, and I do have an amendment, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Will the clerk please, would you like to move your amendment, please?
Yes, thank you. Madam Chair, I move L003 to House Bill 1018.
Thank you. To the amendment.
Thank you. So this is an interesting bill, members.
Will the clerk please read Amendment L003?
Amendment L003 to House Bill 1018.
Senator Hawkes Lewis.
Madam Chair, I move Amendment L003 to House Bill 1018.
Thank you. To the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is an interesting bill. It was basically brought for attention from my predecessor, Senator Mike Foote. So a thank you to him. He was working with adoptive parents that wanted to provide services to adoptive kids that was outside the coverage of HCPF, Medicaid. It went through the House committee. The Health Committee went through through the House unanimously. And then at the very last minute, it was on consent calendar here, we learned that the department might need in the future to possibly go to HHS for a waiver. So this amendment basically adds language to allow them to get a waiver if they ever need to do so in the future. So that's the history of the amendment.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L003? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L003. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Amendment L003 is adopted. To the bill. Senator Jaquez Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I've moved it, but I'll move it again just to be on the safe side. I move House Bill 1018 as amended. Members, this is probably one of the simplest bills that I will ever bring to you, so I ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Is there further discussion on House Bill 1018? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1018. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. House Bill 1018 is adopted.
Sorry, I had to find it real quick.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Senate Bill 61 lay over until tomorrow, April 14th.
The question before us is to lay over Senate Bill 61 at the request of the Majority Leader. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 61 will be laid over at the Majority Leader's request. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 72?
Senate Bill 72 by Senators Hansen and Corman, Representatives Valdez A, concerning the expansion of electric transmission facilities to enable Colorado to meet its clean energy goals and in connection therewith creating the Colorado Electric Transmission Authority, requiring transmission utilities to join regional transmission organizations and allowing additional classes of transmission utilities to obtain revenue through the collocation of broadband facilities within their existing rights-of-way.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I move Senate Bill 72, the Transportation and Energy Committee report, and the Appropriations Committee report.
The Transportation and Energy Committee report.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So we did make some substantial changes in T&E that result of about a month of additional stakeholder analysis and feedback. I think we put the bill, I think, in a good spot to balance the immediate needs of additional transmission in the state with our long-term goals of integrating Colorado into the regional grid. And the amendments in T&E reflected that, and I urge your support of that committee report.
Question before us is the adoption of the Transportation and Energy Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the committee report is adopted. To the Appropriations Committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm just double checking my amendments here. I think that I need to amend the committee report we just adopted. May I ask for Senatorial 5?
Senate will stand in a Senatorial 5. Hansen.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate you letting me double check that. Looks like we'll do this after we talk about the Appropriations Committee. In the Appropriations Committee, we made one small adjustment to the bill after T&E was really focused on making sure that we had equal treatment of all projects as far as the labor rules that would be used for new transmission projects. So I urge your support of the Appropriations Committee report.
Is there further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the committee report is adopted. To the bill. Oh, there's an amendment on the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L013?
Amendment L013 to Senate Bill 72. Amend the Transportation and Energy Committee report dated March 16, 20.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Members, urging your support for L013. This was a result of a long negotiation with both the developers as well as members representing organized labor. I think we came to a good conclusion with L013 to make sure that the labor rules that we've established in the bill are going to apply to construction, expansion, and maintenance. And that is essentially what we're doing with L013. And
amending the transportation.
And we're amending here the Transportation and Energy Committee report. You'll see that in the amendment. So I urge your support of L013.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L013. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Amendment L013 is adopted. There's an amendment on the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L015?
Amendment L015 to Senate Bill 72. Amend the Transportation and Energy Committee.
Hansen.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And members, appreciate your attention this morning on L015. This is the second and last amendment we are asking for your consideration on. This is an amendment that cleans up a number of issues that came out over the last few weeks of continued stakeholding, making sure that we get the technical language correct in a bill. And as those of you that stayed up late last night to read this bill, you'll know this is a somewhat technical bill, so we had a few things we had to get dialed in. I think the chance to clearly put in statute the way that we want to do transmission in Colorado, very carefully making sure that we're taking care of important wildlife habitat along the way, making sure that we're integrating storage into the grid, making sure the entire state has access to transmission resources to boost economic development. And that, I think we're in a good spot to accomplish those goals after the adoption of L015.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L015? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L015. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Amendment L015 is adopted. Senator Hansen, to the bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and members appreciate your attention to these two amendments. Just a quick summary of what we are voting on this morning with Senate Bill 72. The bill does three basic things. Number one, it creates a clear timeline for evaluating.
Move the bill.
Oh, I did, yeah. It creates a clear timeline for evaluating new transmission projects, something that we don't currently have and can drag on for many months and years in some cases. So I think that's a positive step forward for all the operators and customers in the state. The second thing the bill does is create a transmission authority to be able to pursue projects that are in the economic interest of ratepayers and of economic development for the state of Colorado. There are parts of the state that do not have adequate transmission. San Luis Valley, the southwest corner of the state, the southeast corner of the state, all need additional transmission resources. And this transmission authority that we're creating in the bill will help to move those projects forward and put people on the transmission map so that we can develop new investments across the state and create new jobs. And the last thing we're doing with Senate Bill 72 is creating a clear timeline for Colorado to integrate into the rest of our regional grid. And we know from the experience in other states, particularly during the cold snap of a few months ago, how critical that is. We need to be interconnected. We need to be able to share resources during a normal day. We need to be able to share resources on a really hot day in the summer when everyone is running their air conditioners, and we need to be able to share power resources on really cold days when we are short of power. So those are the goals of Senate Bill 72. I think it's a great step forward for Colorado and will lead to billions of dollars of new investment. And I avoid hyperbole at the well at all cost. I'm 100% serious. Billions of dollars of new investment for the Great Plains of our state, for San Luis Valley, for the corners that have been left behind in our transmission grid. And I am so proud to bring this bill with the good senator from Montrose I think it has statewide benefit, and I'm very pleased to do this in a bipartisan manner.
Senator Quorum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's great to work with a great sponsor, and this has been a long, hard process. I think the only thing that he failed to mention that I think is very important is this will actually greatly enhance our ability to bring broadband to rural Colorado because of that fiber that's in those transmission lines. All of my REAs are in support of this. The only opposition that I've been dealing with on a regular basis is now not opposed, and that would be Tri-State.
Is there further discussion on Senate Bill 72? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 72. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 72 is adopted. Will the clerk please read the title of Senate Bill 173?
Senate Bill 173 by Senators Gonzalez, Moreno, and Representative Carvajal and Gonzalez Gutierrez concerning rights related to residential rental agreements.
Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Senate Bill 173, the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee report, and the Appropriations Committee report.
To the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee report, we made a variety of changes. Some of those include around making sure that we are clear in the language as it relates to obtaining assistance and civil and legal aid, adds resources for residential tenants that from the Department of Local Affairs website, clarifies that a blank copy of the answer form must be provided. Madam Chair, there's many amendments that were adopted in the committee that I think makes the bill stronger. It eliminates the right to a jury trial, which was one of the main requests of the opposition. Also changes time to the cure period and clarifies that a lease agreement in Section 11 of this bill is void and unenforceable. So there were a variety of changes and concessions that were made in the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to appreciate everyone who came forward and brought forth their thoughts and comments in regards to the bill. As the good senator from Commerce City has mentioned, there were 7 different amendments that were made in the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. And there also is an amendment to the committee report itself.
We need to adopt the committee report before we can amend the committee report. Is there further
Madam Chair.
discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee report is adopted. Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Appropriations Committee report simply provided the appropriation for this bill. Colleagues, it is not the amount that you see in your fiscal note. The elimination of a jury by trial is primarily what drove the large expenditure in the fiscal note. So because that was struck in the State Affairs Committee, the appropriation was substantially reduced.
Is there further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The Appropriations Committee report is adopted. To the bill.
Madam Chair, may I request a senatorial 5?
Certainly the is an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L011?
Amendment
Senator
L011.
Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I want to, I move Amendment L011 which amends the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee report.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I just want to start by walking through a number of the amendments that were made in, that we just discussed in the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. We heard a lot of feedback from members of the community in committee. And we heard from landlords, we heard from tenants, we heard from property managers. And so this amendment, L011, is responsive to those concerns. You'll see that in the first section of the amendment, lines 1 through 5, in addition to making sure that we provide resources for residential tenants that would be made available on DOLA's website, we also include a website link and a phone number for residential tenants to obtain those resources. We also, upon request from the Colorado Apartment Association, made sure that we were fair in terms of the exchange of documents that take place at the point of an eviction summons being issued and that discovery process. And then the meat of this amendment, Madam Chair, lines 9 through 24 of L011, go through and narrow the time period in which a hearing, a date for trial can be set. The initial language of the bill had stated that the court shall set a date for trial no sooner than 7 days. And upon feedback from the debt collectors and from the landlords, we then narrowed that to ensure that that hearing would, that trial would take place no sooner than 7, but not more than 10 days afterwards, unless, and there is an exception, colleagues, because we know that we still are in the midst of a pandemic, unless the court's docket is being impacted by COVID-19. And so with that, Madam Chair, I ask for an aye vote on Amendment L011.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L011? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L011. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Amendment L011 is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L012?
Amendment L012 to Senate Bill 173. Amend printed bill, page 8, strike lines 13 through 27, page 9, strike lines 1 through 5, and substitute Section 6 in Colorado Revised Statutes.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Amendment L012 to Senate Bill 173.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We heard in committee compelling testimony from a woman who is married to an active duty service member who was deployed and overseas. She lost her job due to COVID and attempted to file a COVID hardship declaration. And yet the Eagle County courts said, well, because your husband is still employed, your family still has income, and denied her COVID hardship and allowed her eviction case to proceed. Colleagues, you may not know that it's actually unlawful to evict a family of an active duty service member. And yet, in February of this year, colleagues, a mother and 4 children of an active duty service member were evicted in Eagle County courts here in 2021 in the midst of a pandemic. Now, she had the legal right to appeal, And yet, in order to submit her appeal, she would have had to pay the entire amount that was due in order to have legal access to submit that appeal. Colleagues, in Senate Bill 173, we struck that provision because we don't believe that one should have to have money in order to access justice. And yet, in response to feedback from opposition stakeholders, they said, oh, but we need to make sure that we're not submitting frivolous appeals. And so, y'all, we have been responsive to that opposition feedback, and that is why we are bringing forward Amendment L012, which unstrikes the appeal requirement and then says, if a judge makes a determination of indigency, this woman, married to an active duty service member with 4 children, was testifying in our State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee from a motel room. In the event that a judge were to declare that an individual, a defendant, was found to be indigent, this amendment would allow that appeal to proceed without the requirement of the entirety of the back rent to be due. And so with that, Madam Chair, I ask for an aye vote on Amendment L012, sadly.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L012? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L012. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Amendment L012 is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read the amendment L013?
Amendment L013 to Senate Bill 173. Amendment printed bill page.
Senator Moreno,
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Amendment L013.
to the amendment.
Colleagues, thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, Amendment L013 makes a couple of changes. One is that it would have been required that a late fee would be required after 14 days of rent being past due. This amendment changes that to 10 days. It also changes the maximum amount that is able to be charged via a late fee from $20 to $50. So that is primarily what the amendment does.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L013? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L013. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Amendment L013 is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L014?
L014 to
Senator
Senate Bill
Gonzalez.
173.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, as the good senator from Commerce City just mentioned, we did amend the guardrails around the late fees that can be charged. To be clear, 17 states across the country already place these types of guardrails on late fees and the grace period that can be charged. And yet, we did, in the printed bill, set forward a process through which, if a late fee was erroneously charged, upon notification via written or electronic written notification from the tenant to the landlord, if the landlord did not cure that error, at that point, after 7 days, at that point, then the tenant could file a civil action. And the penalties of that included a fine of between $500 to $2,000. Madam Chair, Amendment L014 narrows that fine from $500 to $2,000 down to $150, down to $1,000. And I ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Gonzalez. You need to move Amendment L014.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Amendment L014.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on Amendment L014? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L014. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Amendment L014 is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read the title to Amendment L016?
Amendment L016 to Senate Bill 173.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amendment L016 clarifies the affirmative defense that a defendant can make in an eviction hearing around proper notice. Oftentimes, we heard in testimony during the committee hearing that oftentimes tenants aren't even aware of the fact that an eviction case has been levied against them because they weren't properly served with the documents. And so we clarify in Senate Bill 173 that improper notice is an affirmative defense to eviction. And L016 clarifies when that defense can be raised, either in a motion pre-hearing or at the hearing itself, but it cannot be raised for the first time if the defendant failed to raise it in the answer or in a pre-hearing motion. I ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L016? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L016. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Amendment L016 is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L019?
Amendment L019 to Senate Bill 73. Amend printed bill, page 11, strike line 18, strike 14, substitute 7.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This Amendment 019 change.
If you could please move the amendment, Senator Lee.
I'm sorry. I move Amendment 019 to Senate Bill 173.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment reduces the grace period from 14 days. It's been reduced to 10. This reduces it to 7 days. I ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L019? Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate Senator Lee bringing forward this amendment, and initially we did include the 14-day grace period to ensure that because we know that the vast majority of mortgage lenders begin their late fee periods on the 16th day, and yet in response to concerns from the amendment sponsor, I ask for an aye vote.
Senator Lundin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I rise in support of this amendment because it kind of gets to the root of really what this question and this bill is all about. It's about making sure that people have roofs over their heads. And this particular amendment speaks to a grace period. Well, if there's grace being extended, that's a two-party deal. Someone must extend that grace. And so when we begin to ask this question of who is extending that grace, the conversation takes on a greater context and a more complete sense of what this bill is all about. There are two sides to this conversation on an ongoing basis. A roof over someone's head is either provided by that someone or another individual on a short-term relationship rental, which is essentially what this bill is talking about. If we make it so difficult to provide a roof over someone else's head, then all of a sudden, the challenges, the problems that we see broadly already in our society, specifically in Denver, outside, you can look out the windows of this building and see homeless encampments. None of us like that. None of us want to see anyone in those circumstances. But there's a risk, and this amendment seeks to get at that risk by narrowing further from 14 to 7, a grace period. There's a risk that we make it so expensive, so difficult, so burdensome for an individual to say, you know what, I'm going to invest some money in putting a roof over someone else's head. If we make it so difficult that people choose not to do that, in fact, those roofs don't appear. The demand will be ever increasing. And yet we can, by force of law, which is what this Bill 173 potentially does and this amendment seeks to narrow, we can, by force of law, make sure there are fewer roofs available to be put over people's heads. So I rise in support of this amendment. I don't know that 7 is the right number. To go from 14 to 7 is obviously a significant move. Traditionally, 3 is a grace period. 5 is another grace period frequently used in this context. So 7 is still, in my opinion, a very generous grace period. And I want to go back to the fact that someone's extending that grace. Someone has taken risk to provide a roof over someone's head. And we're putting greater burden, greater risk on those individuals who would seek to participate in society in a beneficial way for the benefit of their fellow man. We make it more difficult as we make this broader. This amendment makes it narrower. That's good. But does it narrow it enough? I'm not certain, but the trend is positive. And because of that, I rise in support of Amendment L019. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L019? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L019. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Amendment L019 is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L018?
Amendment L018 to Senate Bill 173. Amend printed bill page 11, line 19, strike days and substitute days. The lender shall allow the landlord the same period of time to make a payment on the mortgage for the property before imposing late fee on the mortgage payment.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Amendment L018 to Senate Bill 173.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill provides reciprocal relief to landlords. If a tenant gets an extension in the time that they get to pay their rent, this would give the landlords a concurrent additional time in which to pay their mortgages and obligations. So it just extends the same benefit to landlords as we are giving to the tenants.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L018? Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do support Amendment L018. I think it's important that we acknowledge that there are two sides to this coin. A renter pays their landlord their rent, but sometimes that landlord also has obligations. Perhaps they have a mortgage. Perhaps they have a loan that they are also required to pay on time. It is a two-step process, and I do think we all need to acknowledge that. So although I support Amendment L018, Madam Chair, I am, however, going to ask for a title ruling because the title relates to tenancy agreements and not to the relationship between the landlord and their lender.
The Senate will stand in Senatorial 5. Thanks, folks. We'll come back to order. The chair rules that Amendment L018 is outside of the title. To the bill. There's an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L024?
Amendment L024 to Senate Bill 173. Amend printed bill, page 15, strike lines 22 through 25, and substitute, the court shall order the tenant to pay into the registry of the court.
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What this amendment says is similar to what we have in the early part of the bill, where we say if someone is going to try and say, I am not paying my rent for a particular reason, we want to make sure that that particular reason isn't that they just don't have the cash. We want to make sure that that particular reason is exactly what it is that they are claiming. And as part of that, this bill takes out part of what was struck and puts that back in. Basically to say, put some earnest money down. If you're going to make a claim under the warranty of habitability, you need to put some money in the game to say, yes, I could pay this rent, but there's a real issue with this apartment. We want to make sure that that is the actual reason that the non-payment of rent is happening, and this bill, this amendment makes sure that that happens. And I move amendment, thank you, L024. I'd also just add that, I ran the warranty of habitability bill. I think that there are some real challenges with how that bill has been implemented, and I think we need to come back and make sure that what we intended to do in that bill is actually happening. I have heard reports of courts ordering significantly more earnest money to be held in these cases than I believe is appropriate, but this amendment makes sure that there is at least some skin in that game, and I ask for an aye vote on L24.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L024? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption. Senator Gonzalez.
I just want to speak really briefly about what a warrant of habitability claim is, because the words sometimes don't necessarily make sense to normal people who don't do this for a living. Because you're not a normal person or a simple country lawyer arguing about the actual implications of these words. A warrant of habitability is a warrant of habitability claim is when your home is no longer livable. It's for issues like mold or bed bugs or your water or heat being turned off or your appliances being removed. And so just as a point of information, back in 2019, the good senator from Greenwood Village worked on policy that said, and in the initial language of the bill said that the judge can make the determination that the tenant had to pay all or a portion of the rent. We don't, again, the intention of Senate Bill 173 is to not make money a requirement to access justice. And so I want to provide that information to our colleagues as we debate this amendment.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I request a senatorial 5.
Senate will stand in a senatorial 5. Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I renew my motion on the amendment and ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L024? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L024. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Amendment L024 is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. Mr. Panetta, please read Amendment L023.
Amendment L023 to Senate Bill 173. Amend printed bill, page 18, strike lines.
Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There has been an enormous amount of change in
Senator
rental
Bridges, if
law.
you could please move your amendment.
Yes, I will do that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have done this before. I move L023.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's been an immense amount of change in rental law over the last few years. What this amendment does is gives folks time to adjust to the changes in this bill, just moves the effective date out to January 1st, and I ask for an aye vote.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L023? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L023. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Amendment L023 is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. Mr. Panetta, please read Amendment L020.
Amendment L020 to Senate Bill 173. Amend printed bill, page 9, line 23, strike 6, and substitute
Senator
7.
Janal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Amendment 020.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment simply is about the 5-unit exemption, and it's quite important because it does affect mom and pop family landlords that, number one, we have consistent standards, House Bill 191118, curing late payments, default of payment. We have House Bill 1332, source of income and housing vouchers. And single-family owners don't have large multifamily management, even software that would catch differences in laws in 30 to 50 unit apartments. We're talking about 5 units or less. And we need to do what we can to preserve the affordable rentals in this state. And I'm asking for the exemption of 5 units or less because these are mom and pop operations that would be affected by this bill. So the exemption would not apply to unlawful removals or unbiased fee agreements or arrangements in those parts of the bill that are preserved for all housing providers. I ask for an aye vote on Amendment L020.
Therefore, Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, to Amendment L020, I am going to request a no vote. I think as we've already established through the multitude of amendments that were just adopted on second reading, as well as the multitude of amendments that have been adopted through the committee process, there have been significant alterations to this bill to try to address opposition concerns. This amendment would essentially amount to 2 different forms of justice, depending on where you live. If you live in a unit that has more than 5, then if you live in a unit where the landlord owns more than 5 units, you have one path to justice. If you live within a unit that the landlord owns less than 5, there's no justice for you. There's no recourse because this bill no longer applies to those landlords. Colleagues, that is a very bad precedent to set in public policy, and I ask for your no vote.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do ask for support of Amendment L020. The difference between a mom and pop, less than 5, and more than 5, would in most industries be categorized as the difference between personal and commercial business. An elderly person, for instance, who has moved into a retirement facility, a senior care facility, might rent a property, a home, as a source of income. Some small mom and pop operations might have 2 properties. Those people are more in a personal line of business than are commercial property owners, managers, landlords. There is a distinct difference. An elderly person who might rent out their home because they need it as a source of income and now live in some sort of senior care facility probably doesn't have the income to afford a law firm. Whereas the large commercial landlords probably have one of those or multiple. It is frustrating. I'll wait to offer my comments about the bill when we're off of amendments, but it is certainly frustrating that this amendment L020 would somehow be looked at as unnecessary or adversarial to the bill, and I certainly ask for an aye vote. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Lundin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I rise in support of Amendment L020. The forgotten man, the forgotten woman. So often we approach things with just a clarity of purpose. I'm going to write a law and it's going to fix something. And we do that sometimes in a way that forgets other people. It forgets the unintended consequences. This amendment seeks to realize that as much as we want to make sure that a tenant doesn't lose the roof over their head, we also don't want the retired couple who put their entire life savings into a rental property for a little bit of extra income to go along with that Social Security check. We don't want them to find themselves in a place where they are not receiving the necessary rent for an extended period of time, and that they perhaps lose that rental property that was their life savings, that they perhaps are forgotten by the policy that's been drawn. And that's at its core House Bill, Senate Bill 173 has this risk, this incredible risk, that it forgets about an entire other group of people who are participants in this dialogue as well. This amendment, L020, simply says for those small participants in putting a roof over someone else's head, that they should not be at greater risk, that they, in fact, have the opportunity to be acknowledged by this big, powerful piece of legislation that will become law potentially in a way that could dramatically and negatively affect them. It's critical that we use a light touch whenever possible as we write laws, that we acknowledge as many of the potentially anticipated unintended consequences as possible. This is one that's just crystal clear. These are folks whose economic circumstance very well may not be dramatically different than the individuals that the bill seeks to help. It simply says, protect the little people who are doing their best to help participate in society by putting roofs over their neighbors' heads. I urge your support of Amendment L020.
Senator Liston.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman and fellow colleagues, I also rise in support of L020. Let me tell you why, just to further dovetail on the good senator from Monument. These people who have put their blood, toil, sweat, and tears into a property They might have started when they were in their 40s, when they had maybe a little bit of discretionary income, maybe just a little bit, and they went out and they bought one rental property. They're thinking ahead for their future, and over a period of years, they might have one and then two, possibly three rental properties. They don't have the legal staffs that big apartment REITs and other sophisticated apartment landlords own. They're doing it on their own. Something goes wrong, they go in and they fix it themselves. They have a very close relationship with their tenants. It's somebody that they know, that they see, sometimes maybe once a week, twice a week. They stay in touch because that rental property, or two or three, that represents sometimes a major portion of their net worth. So they are more than happy to work with their tenants. And if there's a problem, they say, hey, you call me and I'll come right over and I'll fix it. I'll fix it because I value you as a tenant. You pay me on time. If there's a problem and you can't pay me, I'll work with you. I'll give you an extra week. I'll give you an extra month, whatever it takes, because I appreciate the fact that you've been a good tenant and I want to keep you as a tenant. So let's not punish these miniature entrepreneurs who only own one or two or three properties. They're doing their best and they're doing everything they can to comply with the law. And economic circumstances change, and sometimes all of a sudden a major employer in a town might move out, and all of a sudden the rental market collapses. And they don't have, all of a sudden there's a plethora of available rental units, and they're not getting the rental income, but they still have to pay that mortgage, they still have to pay the utilities, they still have to pay the insurance, and sometimes they have negative cash flow. So let's not inadvertently kick them when they're down. This is a good amendment. It's a well-thought amendment. I urge your support of L020. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 173 is an attack on those who provide homes to those who need shelter. By refusing this amendment, it is also an attack on the little guy. The good senator from Douglas County mentioned a retired couple who may be, spending some time in a nursing home, who just needs to put their house up for rent to create some additional income so that they can survive. But we're also making it a crime to those military families who are stationed overseas. When they leave their home here, they want to hold on to their home, and yet we're putting them at risk. If they can't collect rent, they may not be able to make the payments on that home, and they could lose it. It also puts at risk someone who lost their job, trying to hold on to their house by perhaps moving in with a friend or family. Those folks are at risk for losing their house because we refuse to adopt an amendment that exempts the little guy. And I won't mention the lowly legislator from rural Colorado who might rent out their house so that they could come down here and serve. Those are just a few examples of the people that we're putting at risk to lose their homes because we won't take the honest step by saying, you know what, we should cut the little guy some slack. Please support Amendment L020.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to walk down memory lane and taking a page from the good senator from El Paso County, our simple country lawyer. I got myself into trouble because I'm not a lawyer. I just sit on the Judiciary Committee. And I went and I've done some research around the roots of this provision. Where did this come from? It can't have just popped up in 2019. Section 1982 of the Civil Rights Act of 1866 declares that all citizens of the United States shall have the same right in every state and territory as is enjoyed by white citizens thereof to inherit, purchase, lease, sell, hold, and convey real and personal property. By its terms, Section 1982 prohibits all racial discrimination in the sale or rental of property. It made no exceptions. Colorado became the first state in the country to pass a Fair Housing Act. Actually, the anniversary of its passage was just earlier this month, just days ago, April 10th, 1959. The first state in the country to ensure and codify that all Coloradans had the ability to access housing regardless of their race. Curiously, it contained one exemption. And that exemption was for a single homeowner who shared a unit with one other tenant. Not 2 units, not 3 units, not 5 units, not 6 units, just one. 1959. Curiously, just a few years later, in 1963, in Congress, the US Senate was debating the Fair Housing Act. It was also debating another thing called the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And in that Fair Housing Act debate, suddenly a senator from Kentucky raised a notion in order to try to narrow the impact of the Fair Housing Act. Mrs. Murphy was a completely invented character. And I'm quoting here from the Harvard Civil Rights Civil Liberties Law Review. Quote, in 1963, during the debates over Title II, Mrs. Murphy became a slogan by which opponents of Title II appealed to the public. The image conveyed was of the, quote, ancient widow operating a 3 or 4 room tourist home who would, quote, by force of this bill, be required to accommodate transients, italicized, without regard to race. There were fears in that debate in the US Senate around white women being forced to rent to African Americans or Jews. And that, colleagues, is the history of this exemption. It's popped up in different ways. It's popped up maybe not as explicitly here in the 21st century. These are neutral sounding policies that have extraordinarily disparate impact. And so I understand wanting to protect and make sure that everyone has a level playing field. It is why we brought forward Senate Bill 173 in the first place. But colleagues, do not be confused about this amendment. Opponents to this bill are utilizing old, tired, vicious, neutral sounding policy. And now let's talk about who actually gets impacted by eviction. We know that in the same way that the criminal justice system criminalizes men of color get locked up. Women of color are the folks who get locked out. And so, colleagues, to this amendment, I urge in the strongest terms possible a no vote, because it will create two systems of justice, because it will lead to confusion. And colleagues, I want to ask the amendment sponsor, how would this actually practically be enforced? How would a tenant know whether or not their landlord has 3 units or 7 units? In what instance what would happen in the event that upon the signing of the lease, the landlord owns 4 units and then purchases a 5th? What then? I ask for a no vote.
Senator Janal. Senator Liston.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Actually, Senator Liston, it's just Madam Chair. Thank you. Please proceed.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm sorry. Well, let me, members, I just got this from a constituent just a few minutes ago. He is a small landlord. I think he owns 2 or 3, 4 units. And I'm just going to paraphrase it, but he's watching this bill literally as we're debating it right now. He's a young man, probably in his 30s, and he owns a small number of rental units, and he has put an inordinate amount of time, money, and effort into his rental units. He's very diligent. He works with his tenants. And he says, few can afford the defense associated with the jury trial on eviction. Just yesterday, I had the sheriff call off an eviction for me at the last minute over a total technicality. The tenant has the money, and he has chosen not to pay the rent for 6 months. It's very frustrating these days. So for 6 months, he has not had any rental income. And he knows his tenant pretty well, whoever the tenant is, doesn't matter. So in the meantime, this person has had to pay the mortgage, pay the utilities, probably pay an attorney, more than likely. In fact, I'm sure he's had to pay an attorney because he's referenced his attorney on several occasions. And so he's run up literally thousands of dollars, and this is just on one rental unit. And as to the question from the good senator who posed this question, well, how is the tenant going to know whether the landlord owns 1 or 2 or 3 units? Quite frankly, in a way, it really shouldn't matter to the degree that the landlord is just trying to do his job and keep the property up and running and pay for things. And if there is this exception, which is in L020, so be it. It's for the sake of a small landlord who has invested literally tens and tens of thousands of dollars, and they're on hook for the mortgage, not the tenant. They're on hook. And if they don't pay the mortgage then they get fined, penalties and interest, and it goes on their credit report. This is a good, reasonable amendment. I urge an aye vote. Thank you.
The Senate will stand in a senatorial 5. Senator Janal. Senator Janal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I renew my motion for L020 because this bill, this amendment does have different consequences for people who own 1, 2, or 3 rental units versus those that have 30, 50, 100, or more. So I'm asking for your support on L020.
Is there further discussion? Senator Gonzalez.
I renew my question around how a tenant would know what system of justice they're accessing if this amendment passes.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L020? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L020. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. The ayes have it. Amendment L020 is adopted. To the bill. Is there further discussion on Senate Bill 173? Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While I appreciate many of the amendments, maybe all of the amendments that have been adopted, I am disappointed that Senate Bill 173 is here in the Senate chamber. Real estate and real estate finance have been really at the center of my time in this building since 2002. I was proud during the special session to work with my friend from Denver, one of the prime sponsors of this bill, on a housing-related bill. And one of the reasons, or really the reason I agreed to put my name on that, is that that bill promoted a program that's available through DOLA that really requires landlords and tenants to work together and apply for, request assistance from DOLA for financial assistance. If a landlord has a mortgage, he or she has to make that mortgage payment. But because of COVID over the past year, if tenants have lost their income and they couldn't pay their rent, they couldn't be evicted. And that specific program helps address that. It can't be a landlord going to say, hey, give me free money, or a tenant saying, give me free rent. They have to go together to say, we have this relationship, tenant and landlord, who then has a mortgage. And if DOLA can help both parties or all parties, because the landlord may have more than one tenant, then evictions don't happen and foreclosures don't happen. Many years ago, legislation was passed here in this General Assembly that was referred to as construction litigation reform. Advocates for that legislation stood up for homeowners in multifamily, owner-occupied scenarios who were confronted by, in some cases, poor construction. And when you live in an owner-occupied multifamily environment, maybe that is a condominium, maybe it's a townhouse, whatever it might be, if the other side of the development is falling apart and your unit is okay, you're in an HOA multifamily environment and you have shared liability. So I understand the motivation for that original legislation, and I'm grateful that a few years ago there was bipartisan support to provide a little bit of relief. But if anyone in Colorado wonders why today affordable, attainable, multifamily, owner-occupied housing isn't built in Colorado, that's why. That is why. If you want to spend high 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures for owner-occupied multifamily housing, say here in the Metro Denver area, that's available. But if you want to own a small unit in a multifamily tower, if you want to get your start as a homeowner, that is almost impossible to do in this market because the construction litigation reform in this state has just made it far too financially challenging and way too far challenging in the judicial branch, getting sued. Who would sue? Not necessarily homeowners, trial attorneys. But over the past 15 years or more, that shift in our community, in our state, the decrease, the almost complete lack of anything that would be categorized as affordable or attainable in a multifamily owner-occupied scenario, that supply really doesn't exist. Maybe a few units here and there, but really hard to find that. That has meant this enormous shift to rental units in owner-occupied multifamily housing. You drive around Denver, you see the big rectangular buildings, and today it's popular to put a slanted roof on it or a colorful slash of something hanging off the front to make it look something other than just a big rectangular block. But those are rental units. A very significant population here in Colorado relies on rental properties. Because unless they're looking at $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 to buy an entry-level owner-occupied unit, renting is their choice. My older son a few years ago, he just did not want to rent. He just couldn't bring himself to pay thousands of dollars a month to rent something. So he waited, and he bought a very modest home in northern Colorado Springs, and he has a mortgage payment. He just refinanced and got rid of the second mortgage, the down payment assistance that helped him qualify for that, and lowered his rate. But his property is appreciating. He has to drive a long ways to afford that house because in our community in Douglas County, he couldn't. But if Senate Bill 173 becomes law, my projection is that there will be landlords who will decide that Colorado is no longer a competitive marketplace for them. That we've had appreciating property values, but if the risk, the financial and legal risk is too high, and we don't have some magic gauge, some magic meter that shows us where that line is, but every time you push a little bit harder on a business to do business, that they can always look around and say, gosh, there's 49 other states. My wife and I, we have family in Florida, and it's just shocking to see the differences. If you want to buy multifamily owner-occupied in a single story or a two-story, a three-story, or 10 or 50, or if you want a patio home, if you want to buy a little space or a big space, there's so much opportunity for owner-occupied multifamily housing in that state. I'm not an expert in things in Florida or other states, but it's shocking how available those opportunities are in Florida, and they don't exist here. So with the lack of owner-occupied opportunity, we have, I believe, more than a generation. It's not just 20-somethings just out of college, But we have 30-somethings and probably 40-somethings in Colorado who haven't owned real estate before. So having appreciating property values in our state, that's good for those of us who do own. But to be able to get in at that bottom level, like my wife and I did in 1987, we bought a 2.5 bedroom, 2-bath condo with a full basement for $87,000 in Southeast Denver. And now those are high fours. But there's nothing like that for my sons in the Metro Denver area. There's nothing like that. Even if you figure in for appreciation and inflation and all, that can you, if you're a 20-something, can you go buy something for $250, $300 in Metro Denver? No. If you can, more power to you. But in this environment where that inventory just doesn't exist, now we're going to make it harder and more expensive, by the way, for landlords who rent properties. Where are people going to live? In 5 years, 10, 20? When our successors, those who serve in the Senate, are standing here 15, 20 years from now, what will they say then? Where are people going to live if you can't buy or rent? And I think this bill will reduce the supply of rental housing in a market where we desperately need more owner-occupied and rental housing. It's certainly not going to attract new landlords to Colorado. I'm confident that it's going to incentivize some to leave. This is a topic I happen to know a lot about because of my career. And again, I've been proud to stand here with my friend from Denver and ask for a yes vote on other legislation. But on this one, I plead with you, members, vote no. This is not good for our state. This is not good for housing. Please vote no on Senate Bill 173.
Is there further discussion on Senate Bill 173? Senator Lundin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Supply and demand are at issue here, and there are two critical questions that we need to ask ourselves as we contemplate this bill, because I think it will have significant effect on this bill will have significant effect on the answer. First question is this: do we have enough affordable housing for the people of Colorado? The answer is obvious. It's manifest. As I said earlier, you look outside the windows of this building and you see homeless encampments. If you drive around town, you see homeless encampments. And that's only the most stark example of the affordable housing crisis we have in Colorado. The second question we need to answer, and this is the operative question that we must consider with regard to Senate Bill 173, does this bill improve or worsen the circumstance of that reality, the lack of affordable housing in Colorado? Consider this. Premise one: gravity. It's a law. There are also economic laws. This bill flies in the face of one of the most critical economic laws. You remember back to Econ 101? Supply and demand, price equilibrium. The reality is, if you do things that increase the supply of something, if you take friction away, if you take risk away, if you add available resources to increase supply of something, and the demand remains constant, the price and the quantity of the product available are increased. Excuse me, the price is decreased and the quantity is increased. This bill will have the exact opposite effect. It creates friction, it creates costs, it creates risk. It will prevent future roofs from being built to put over people's heads, where they can have a warm, dry, comfortable place to raise their family. This bill will decrease the supply. And what does that do if the demand remains constant? It increases the cost and reduces the quantity. But we all know that's not even the circumstance in which we live in Colorado. The demand for housing is growing. More and more people continue to come into the state. More families are growing and seeking roofs over their heads. So as demand increases and supply decreases, driven by bills like 173, the cost will get greater and the supply will get smaller. That's a really wonky explanation, but like the gravity that pulled my keys to the floor, like the gravity that will pull supply down, it's inevitable, it's unavoidable. It is a result, inescapable result of 173. So let me make it very, very stark. If you oppose affordable housing, if you want less affordable housing, get up on your horse, vote for 173. If you want more affordable housing, take the exact opposite stance, take the exact opposite position. Get on your horse and vote no for 173. I don't know why I got a horse in the middle of that conversation, but I did. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there further Senator Gonzalez.
I've heard some really eloquent arguments today about the need to protect homeowners and landlords. How many renters how many people in this chamber are renters for their primary residence? I don't see a hand. For all of the stats and figures and statistics around the need to protect homeowners, I don't believe there's a one of us who's currently a renter. I see lots of clutching of pearls around our affordable housing crisis. And yeah, we're in one. I walk to a meeting twice a week where I walk by people experiencing homelessness. According to some national figures from the Biden administration that just came out last night, 379,000 renters in Colorado are rent burdened, meaning that they spend more than 30% of their income on rent. We're in a crisis situation. And yet, some of the statistics and figures that have been cited by the opposition, when you put them in context, they just don't make any sense. We are in an affordable housing crisis, but let's not make sure that renters have a fair day in court. Late fees are an existential threat, and yet 17 other states already provide guardrails, many of those states actually have even hotter, if it's able to be believed, even hotter real estate markets than us here in Colorado. Y'all, I represent Northwest and downtown Denver. I know what a hot retail market, what a hot real estate market is. The long-standing impacts of gentrification and displacement have disproportionately impacted Black and brown Coloradans. And it's why we brought forward this policy. Senate Bill 173 is about basic fairness. It's about being able to have a day in court. You know, the opposition would tell you that this bill is going to be an existential threat to them. And yet, what we have seen, we heard in testimony, the apartment association themselves said that even in the midst of a pandemic, even since October 2020, Governor Polis has, through executive order, created a prohibition on late fees altogether. And yet, 95% of Colorado renters are paying their rent on time. We know that the vast majority of landlords are good people. We know that the vast majority of tenants are good people. And we know that as Coloradans, when we hit hard times, we support one another and we show folks a little bit of grace. That's why we established a grace period for late fees. We also set some guardrails to say, you know what? If you experience a moment of difficulty, here's a grace period so that you can make sure to pay the rent that we all know is due. I also want to talk about another provision that's in this bill that is important. And that's around creating some penalties for illegal lockouts. Now, there's already existing statute, colleagues, in regards to illegal lockouts. Illegal lockouts are, guess what, illegal. But there were no enforcement mechanisms. So if a landlord shut off their water for a tenant, if a landlord took off the locks, if the landlord rendered the unit uninhabitable, now with this bill, a tenant will have the ability to seek remedy in court, have a fair day, have a fair shot at justice. Colleagues, I ask for an aye vote in regards to this bill because the people of this state are begging for us to take action.
Is there further discussion on Senate Bill 173? There's an amendment on the desk. Mr. Panetta, please read Amendment L025.
Amendment L025.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Amendment L025 and ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L025. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Amendment L025 is adopted. To the bill. Senator Bridges.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What a morning. Today has had a lot of work being done on this bill, a whole lot of amendments being done on this bill. I want to thank, in particular, Ms. Wydrant at the drafting desk and Ms. Ritter, who is the drafter of this bill, for some really intense last-minute work on this bill this morning, and I think we got it to a pretty good place. I want to thank the senator from the north side and the senator from Commerce City for their work on this bill. It has been quite a process, and I know especially this morning it's been really tough. It's been a lot of conversation, a lot of amendments, and I just want to say on the record how much I appreciate the work that they've done and urge an aye vote on the bill.
Is there further discussion on Senate Bill 173? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 173. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 173 is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Senate Bill 116 lay over until tomorrow, April 14th.
The motion before us is to lay over Senate Bill 116 until tomorrow. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 116 will be laid over at the Majority Leader's request. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
The motion before the committee is to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the committee will rise and report.
The Senate will come to order. Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has met and heard a number of bills under consideration. Mr. Panetta, please read the report.
Mr. President, your committee in the whole begs leave to report has had under consideration the following attached bills being the second reading thereof and makes the following recommendations thereon. Senate Bill 72 as amended, Senate Bill 173 as amended, passed on second reading, order engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1018 as amended, passed on second reading, order revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 61 and 116 laid over until April 14th and retained their place on the calendar.
Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of the report.
Will the clerk please will the clerk please add Senator Liston to the committee of the whole? Let me start all over again. Will the clerk please add Senator Liston to the roll call? The motion is the adoption of the committee of the whole report. There is an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment 001 of the committee of the whole report?
Amendment 001.
Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Cal Amendment 001.
To the amendment, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. What this Cal Amendment does, it changes the committee of the whole report to show that Senator Lee's floor amendment, L018 to Senate Bill 173, did fit under the title and did pass. Basically, his amendment says that a lender shall allow the landlord the same period of time to make a payment on the mortgage for the property before imposing a late fee on the mortgage payment. It's only fair, it's only right if we're going to penalize a homeowner and not allow them to charge late fees, then that homeowner should have some grace from their mortgage that they have to pay. So I'd ask for an aye vote on Cal 001, that it did fit under the title, and it did pass.
Before we entertain discussion, the good senator from Greeley will be fined accordingly $3 for referring to the good senator's amendment from Colorado Springs, Senate District 11. Further discussion. Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this Cal Amendment, no disagreements with the intent of the amendment and the policy. Still don't think it fits under the title, but vote your conscience.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Amendment 001 of the Committee of the Whole report. Are there any no votes? Senators Hawkins Lewis, Moreno, Kolker, Rodriguez, Hansen, Coleman, Donovan, Danielson. No votes. The Majority Leader. Gonzalez. With 25 aye votes, 10 no votes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, Amendment 001 is adopted. There is an amendment at the motion is for the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report. Are there any no votes on the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report? With 35 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, and 0 excused, the Committee of the Whole report is adopted. Senate Bill 072 is amended. Senate Bill 173 is amended, passed on second reading, ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1018 is amended, passed on second reading, ordered revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 061, Senate Bill 116 laid over until 4/14/21 and retaining its place on the calendar. Consideration of House amendments. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 040?
Senate Bill 40 by Senator Scott and Gonzalez and Representative Rick and Roberts concerning the use of a person's driving history record to make decisions that concern the practice of an occupation.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate concur with House amendments to Senate Bill 40.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is that the Senate concur with House amendments to Senate Bill 040. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, that motion is adopted. Senator Gonzalez. Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we concur and that we pass Senate Bill 040 as amended.
Senator, those are two different motions. Which one would you like?
I think we did concurrence, correct?
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the repassage of Senate Bill 40.
The motion is for the repassage of Senate Bill 040. Are there any no votes on the repassage? With 35 aye votes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, Senate Bill 040 is repassed. Co-sponsors. Senator Lee. Announcements. Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. AG will have its first upon adjournment meeting of the session. We will meet at 11:20 in the Old Supreme Court. Thank you.
Senator Janal.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Local Government Committee will meet at 2 p.m. today in room 352. We're hearing 3 bills: Senate Bill 204, House Bill 1138, and House Bill 1115.
Senator Fields.
Good morning, Mr. President and colleagues. I have spoken to the minority leader and the majority leader and have requested to be absent tomorrow morning.
The good senator will be marked excused for tomorrow. Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just made an incorrect announcement. AG meets tomorrow. Apologies.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. However, Transportation meets today, and we will be hearing an appointment to our Nautical Board, Senate Bill 231 and Senate Bill 230 at 2 p.m. See you there.
Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just want to make an announcement. The State Veteran and Military Affairs Committee will be meeting today at 2 o'clock in the Old Supreme Court. We have 2 bills we're hearing, Senate Bill 199 and House Bill 1092.
Committee reports.
April 12th, Committee on Health and Human Services, after consideration of the merits of committee recommends the following House Bill 1169 be referred to committee whole with favorable recommendation. April 12th, Mr. President, the Committee on Health and Human Services had in consideration had a hearing of the following appointments. Recommends that the appointments be placed on the consent calendar and confirm members of the Medical Services Board for terms expiring July 1st, 2024. Annie Nien of Denver, Colorado, to serve as resident of the 1st Congressional District, a Democrat with knowledge of medical assistance programs. Reappointed Christina Mulkey of Denver, Colorado, to serve as a resident of the 7th Congressional District, a Republican with knowledge of medical assistance programs. Appointed Vincent Scott of Severance, Colorado, to serve as a resident of the 4th Congressional District and unaffiliated, and as a family member of a person with a disability. Appointed Morgan Honia, MHA of Centennial, Colorado, to serve as a resident of the 6th Congressional District and unaffiliated with experience in caring for medically underserved children. Appointed April 12th, Committee on Health and Human Services, after consideration of the merits, the committee recommends the following House Bill 1190 be amended as follows. So amended be referred to the committee of the whole with favorable recommendation placed on the consent calendar. April 12th, Committee on Business, Labor, and Technology, after consideration of the merits, the committee recommends the following House Bill 1147 be referred to the committee of the whole with favorable recommendation placed on the consent calendar. April 12th, Committee on Business, Labor, and Technology, after consideration of the merits, the committee recommends the following House Bill 1019 be referred to the committee with favorable recommendation placed on the consent calendar. April 12th, Committee on Business, Labor, and Technology, after consideration of the merits, the committee recommends the following House Bill 1204 be referred to the committee of the whole with favorable recommendation placed on the consent calendar.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, we have a few bills to read across. You don't need to be here. Mr. President, I move that the Senate recess until 12 noon today.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The Senate will stand in recess until 1200 hours today.